Could you explain PTS?
Yeah, sure. So PTS is an acronym for potential trouble source. And what that basically means is a person is potentially a trouble source if they're connected to an individual who is actively antagonizing, harming, or suppressing their life. And when you're connected to somebody like that, you become what the church refers to as PTS, or somebody who is potentially a trouble source. So this is like a huge item in Scientology. Everybody's PTS. We got to find PTS, and that, it's like this medieval wild goose chase for people who are speaking out against the Catholic Church. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's totally crazy, and it's this kind of like, and it's getting to the point now. It got to the point when I was there where it's like, being PTS was like being like a leper. You know what I mean? It was like kind of like this crazy. This crazy kind of association that it would be like, oh my God, PTS, oh my God, you know what I mean? And I think that's really interesting, because you're allegedly or supposedly engaging in this philosophy that's supposed to totally free you from all these situations and experiences and relationships that are supposed to kind of like unleash, your potential as a human being. And here everyone is, the whole organization, just horrified of this possibility that you could be connected to somebody who's antagonistic. And one of the things that's so interesting, I think, too, is when they try to have you find the person who's antagonizing you, they always, this is really interesting, is that they always try to, like, you don't know who it is. You know what I mean? It's like for me, it's like if somebody's antagonizing my life, it's pretty obvious. You know what I mean? I know they're doing it to me. But they try to make it like this secret thing where like they might be doing it to you in a way you don't know what's happening. So you really have to like find. So it makes you like churn these mental wheels incessantly. I mean, I was to the point where I was like, is my mother doing this to me? Is my father doing this to me? And my parents have been nothing but supporters to me my whole life and everything I've done. And I was to the point where I was actually considering the fact that they were like these evil people my whole life and I didn't know they were. You know what I mean? So they have this amazing ability to get you to consider that there are people in your life that have never hurt you, are actually secretly plotting your destruction.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Conversely, the only people you can trust
are them. Yeah. It's definitely an us versus them mentality once you get into the organization, and I think that's a really sad thing because, we live in the information age. I mean, we live in like the postmodern world where information is everywhere. It's free, and it's changing. You know what I mean? So here you have this philosophy that's stuck in the 1960s. It's not changing because, and I don't even know if Hubbard himself, I actually think Hubbard himself would want it to evolve, but I think the organization has put any stop on any like development of the technology, any new kind of philosophical streams to inject into the philosophy, and they're stuck. And in this day and age, that is like the opposite of what's happening on planet Earth. I mean, it's really exciting to be alive on planet Earth. There's so many things happening in terms of technology, spirituality. All these different things are growing and changing at such a rapid rate with the internet. And here you have Scientology that's just stuck in 1962. And we know the answers, and we're not changing, and this is how it is. And you see why their numbers are declining, and you see why people are leaving, and you see why, and not only that, but you have this terrible abuse that the organization is engaging on a daily basis, human rights, financial, all these different actions that they're taking on that are legitimate abuse of human beings, coupled with their totally backwards philosophy. It's no wonder why it's a dying organization.
You talk about the information age. When you're there at the Fort Harrison,
yeah,
are you able to hop on the net,
yeah,
look at the outside world?
Yeah, you are, but you're not allowed to hop on the net to look on anything about Scientology. You know what I mean? But you are. Yeah, there's internets there that you can look on. The actual staff members can't, but public are fine. I mean, there's free Wi-Fi and everything like that in the hotel. When I was down there, there was an article in the Drudge Report. I was on the Drudge Report one day reading something, and there was an article about Scientology. I forget what it was, but it was something, and I clicked on it, and I said to somebody, said this really horrible thing about Scientology on the internet. I go, what were you reading that for? I said, it was on the front page of the Drudge Report, and I was reading the Drudge Report. And I might even, I don't know what it was CNN or something like that. But yeah, so I got in trouble for that. They just asked, why did you click on it? What did it say? Did you tell anybody? Did you talk about it with anybody? Stuff like that. So it was basically like a very subtle inquisition of the actual, and for me it wasn't even a big deal because at that point I was still, willing to trust the organization and believe that what I read was false, so they by their own actions pushed me further away. Like for me, I read it, I didn't hide it, I said to them, I read it, and then there was this kind of like, inquisition into my life, and then I was like, whoa, what the, what's going on right now? And then from that experience made me realize that, whatever.
So the quality of auditing, you said, was troubling at Flag. How was it different from what you had in Boston?
I think the main difference was just the care of the people. You know what I mean? And I think that's what auditing or any therapeutic process is, that you have two people, one person who's the practitioner or the psychologist or the auditor, and the other person who's the student or the patient or the pre-clear. And I think in any situation, when the person who's engaging in the therapeutic act has care and respect and honors the process, then good things happen, no matter what it is, auditing or not auditing. So I think in Boston, I found that there was a genuine care for me processing, doing the actions in Scientology, whereas at Flag there was very little care, and every time I walked out of the auditing room, there was 3 people looking for me. One to have me join the Sea Org, one to have me donate money to the IAS, maybe 4. One to have me donate money to Superpower, one to have me donate money to Planetary Dissemination, one to have me donate money to Ideal Orgs, one to have me buy the bridge. So there was, at any given time, there was 1 of 6 people looking for me the moment I walked out. And it's really interesting because they coordinate it. You know what I mean? So like, for instance, the IAS, they'll call the person who's in charge of the auditor and say, hey, is Joe Smith out of session yet? And they'll look and say, oh, he'll be out in 10 minutes. All right, good, I'll go up and meet him. So they have this whole thing kind of worked out where the people are like waiting for people. And it's actually to the point where they know if the session went good or not. So it's like they know if somebody had a really good session and they, maybe had some kind of experience that could be conceived like a kind of a spiritual epiphany or some kind of awakening, that this would be a good time to get money from them. You know what I mean? So they have this whole thing worked out, which is just like, yeah, it's sickening. You know what I mean? It's beyond sickening.
Would they know that before you actually left the audit?
Yeah, I found that afterwards, yeah. Not before they left the auditing room, but they would talk to there would be some kind of dialogue between what's called the tech services and the IAS people. So the tech services would be the people that coordinate with the auditor to get the pre-clearance session, and they would know the situation just based upon what the pre-clear looks like or what they're talking about, and they could go back, oh, he looks really happy. You should go get some, kind of like that.
Well, they wouldn't necessarily know details of your auditing.
No. They wouldn't know any details other than the fact that Joe Smith just walked out of the auditing session and he's beaming, and he has this big smile on his face, and he's talking to everybody, and things look really good for Joe Smith. You should go talk to him. Yeah, there would be no details, but there would be kind of a perception of him as a human being and what auditing is actually quite powerful when it's done correctly, and there's no question in my mind that even though I don't think it's necessarily the best therapeutic approach, it's definitely a beautiful way for people to potentially, engage in some kind of healing practice. And there's no question that it can have these big, huge kind of like effects where people can walk out of a room and go, whoa, I feel incredibly alive right now. I feel incredibly happy right now, something like that. So anybody could see that effect on a person and run back and say, hey, Joe Smith's looking pretty good right now. You might want to go talk to him and see if he wants to donate some money. So it's truly sickening the way they manipulate that situation. The person who signed me up for services at Flag was a guy named Charlie Bills, who apparently is like this old kind of like, war veteran of Scientology who's been around for a long time. And it's kind of funny because he would say to me, literally, before I went there, don't give anyone any money. You know what I mean? He would actually say this in those direct words. Don't give anyone any money. So it's interesting because the first day I got there, I was supposed to get picked up by the Flag kind of like hotel bus, the Fort Harrison bus. So I get off the plane, and I remember I had a connection in Charlotte that day. It was Boston, Charlotte, Tampa. And I got off the plane and I go down to get my bags, and I'm waiting in line to get my bags, and all of a sudden someone says, hey, Brian, And I turn around and it's like this 16-year-old girl, 17-year-old girl. And I was just like, yeah? And she was like, hey, I'm here to pick you up. And I'm like, you're here to pick me up? I'm like, do you have a license? You know, kind of kidding around. And then some other older guy she was with. And it was interesting, she was his boss, which I found really fascinating. She was like a 16-year-old girl, and he was like a 50-year-old man, and she was his boss, which is actually really common in Scientology, which actually is kind of cool, you know what I mean? Which is kind of interesting that they don't pay attention to.
What's the rationale behind that?
The rationale, I should say that I don't think that's necessarily cool, but I think the fact that they overdo it, but the fact that like age and sex never played a role in Hubbard's thinking of who should be responsible in an organization, which I actually think was actually somewhat forward thinking. Now I don't mean kids, but I mean like if there's a 20-year-old woman who's as good as a 50-year-old guy, Hubbard would say 20-year-old woman's going to do it because she's better, you know what I mean? And I thought that was somewhat admirable of him in terms of his ability to see through cultural and sexual and social restrictions that were really in place in the 60s, that he saw right through that. But anyway, the point being is that this young woman and this guy come to pick me up, and they are from the Superpower Project, and they knew I was coming, and they knew I was coming to do my L's. So they say, we're here to pick you up and give you a ride. And I say, okay, fine. So we get in the car, and the whole car ride from Tampa to Clearwater, which is about a 25-minute drive, it's incessant, nonstop badgering for money for the Superpower Project. I get this full rundown of what it is, and it's interesting. It's 2012 now. This is 2009. It was going to be open in 3 months, and they needed the money. It's 3 years later. It's not open. You know what I mean? Which I find kind of interesting. And they were using the line that it's going to be open in a few months. We need this money to open it, and blah blah blah. So they wanted $35,000. I gave them, I think, $5,000 in the car ride. And then I get out of the car, and I had prepaid for like 3 months of living in the Fort Harrison hotel, and I think I was like $1,000 short. And there was like a representative for the hotel who was standing, who literally opened the door for me. It was like, "Where's $1,000?" You know. So I gave him $1,000 cash, and then an hour later, I'm in Dave Foster's office getting regged for my entire bridge, which was like $150,000. So I mean, and this never stopped though, Mark. I mean, this was like, you know, basically from the day I got there to the day I left, there were 7 people asking me for money the whole time. Every day, nonstop.